tell me about tell me a little bit about your about your background in the fire service. When did you start, and how did you start in the working with the fire service?
I started in 1990. That's 28, almost 29 years ago. I started in this smaller town called Suonenjoki as a well, not like a voluntary, but a part-time firefighter. My father has been doing that for 40 years, and now is not doing it anymore. So it's a family business basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've been there working there as a part-time firefighter and unit commander. And then I joined the college here at the Emergency Services College 7 years ago. So I've been working. Also, my day job has been with the fire and rescue now for 7 years. Before that, I was working for a university here in Kuopio, doing research and then teaching work, and did my PhD in 2007, and then after that, well, the subjects that we were studying or doing research on at the university were not so close to what I wanted to do. So there was a position at the academy, and then I came to work for the academy.
Okay, so what kind of research did you do before?
Computer science, basically cybersecurity, and I did my PhD on payment systems, the security of mobile payment systems. So it's not very close.
So
to
that was pretty big gap in between.
Yeah, but actually, in the beginning, I came here to do a research project on more like IT related stuff and data communications from at the field, basically. And then after that, the project and my, let's say, interest has been shifted more to actual firefighting. And we have three senior, well, actually at the moment, two senior research scientists, and my responsibility is the field of practical firefighting methodology and rescue methodology, like, for example, extrication or fire extinguishing methods. So that's my responsibility at the college.
Okay. So I want to start, we'll get to maybe your research, what you're doing now, but I want to start with going back, and I want to focus especially on, to start with, the use of portable fire extinguishing tools, like a normal fire extinguisher, like a dry chem extinguisher, like a powder extinguisher. If you go back to when you started in the fire service, was that a common use in the fire service to use fire extinguishers?
No, absolutely not. We had maybe one dry powder extinguisher in the truck that was used for when you have a traffic accident and you want to quickly bring something to use in case the vehicle would catch fire. That would probably be the only use for a handheld extinguisher in the fire service at that time, and also it has been like that for a really long time. Just until recently, we have started to investigate or do research on how we would maybe use handheld extinguishers in the fire service as real tools.
So if you would try to describe or explain why is it that the fire service didn't use, if we start on that one, didn't use fire extinguishers as a tool for building fires 20 years ago?
Well, actually, when I talk to guys who have been around much longer than I, they say that actually they 30 years ago they used these handheld extinguishers in house fires. So and then we got more advanced water based extinguishing methods and better hoses and better jet nozzles, and started to use those and forgot all about these portable extinguishers until quite recently. So I think it's also a matter of what's let's say fashionable.
Yeah, it's cyclical. It goes around,
Yeah,
comes
yeah,
back,
yeah,
and
it does.
it's
Yeah,
almost like fashion.
yeah.
But
Okay.
if you go back, like in Sweden, there was the law in 1986. There was a law that said for interior work, firefighter has to bring a hose line. That came in 1986 in Sweden. That was one of the reasons, I think, because if you go back in Sweden, back to the 80s and especially the 70s, it was quite common to use handheld extinguishers as a
Yeah,
rapid way of getting something
yeah,
at the fire.
yeah.
But that in 86 or 80 when I think it was the same. I would say you can argue if you want, but I think it's the same progress. We got the fog fighter, we got, like you said, better nozzles, we got the knowledge about cooling gases with a hand line back in the 80s. And like you said, that kind of pushed the handheld extinguisher away, as now we have the fog fighter, and that was the savior and the tool that's going to solve all the problems. But again, I think it's also about the legislation that said you cannot go inside a smoke-filled environment in Sweden without a hose line. Did you have, or do you have, a similar law that dictates that for your firefighters?
We followed the same set of rules. So basically, if you are going to go into a smoke-filled compartment, then in our terms, that's termed as smoke diving.
Yeah.
I think probably the same definition all around. And there is a set of rules when you are doing smoke diving, what you can or and what you should bring, and what kind of qualification the guys must have who are doing that, and then also what kind of equipment they have to carry, and to have a hose line for these guys who are doing the smoke diving. And then we must have a second pair of guys that we call security pair or whatever, that must also have their own hose line. So
So first on a side note, before we jump back, when you say thick smoke, like if you're going into smoke, is there a clear definition of what that means? Like how do you define thick smoke, or is that kind of arbitrary?
I don't think there is like a um, I don't think there is a very clear definition, but basically I think the translation from the code would be that if it's a restricted smoke-filled space. So basically, if you go to a house fire, go inside the house and it's full of smoke, then you are basically doing smoke diving. But if you just use a BA, for example, in a car fire, that's not defined as smoke diving.
So if you judge it to be smoke diving, you have to have a host line for the team that goes in. You have to also have a host line for the security team that waits on the outside.
Exactly. Yes.
So let's jump back. Do you know how old that law is? Is it sort of like Sweden? Is it back into the 80s, or do you know if it's older than that? Or
I don't know if it's older than that, but I think it's more or less the same time period.
Time period.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe it's the same reason in Finland, Sweden, that handheld extinguishers went away. That it was kind of again, we had this new fashionable tool. It fell into hiding. We got the law says you have to bring a hose line, so now you can't go interior with a dry chem or dry powder. So tell me about the recent trend of bringing handheld fire extinguishers and maybe other portable tools back into the fire service. Why is this happening?
Well, first of all, I think we have just forgotten that they are very useful tools in certain cases. But I must address that we still have the concept of smoke diving. It hasn't disappeared anywhere. And we don't recommend using anything but the hose line for smoke diving, because it's still our rather clear idea that you cannot do smoke diving safely with a handheld extinguisher. But
is that both for suppression capability and for like also just finding a way out, or how does it?
Both. It's basically both. First of all, if the room or the wherever you go is full of smoke, then without the hose line, it's much more difficult to find your way out. That's one thing. But also the limited capacity of a handheld extinguisher will not give you enough protection to go into a real house fire. But the reason why we want to introduce these tools back to our, let's say, choice of tools is that most of our house fires are still very small in the beginning when the fire first crew arrives. And some of them don't even grow any higher than being very small. So the idea is that if you have a situation where, let's say, it's a 3-story house, you go to the third store, and you open the door and you see that, okay, there's a little bit of smoke in the ceiling, but with good visibility. Then you can go further and find the food that has been forgotten to the stove from the kitchen, and use a foam extinguisher to put out that, and just then open some windows and ventilate the apartment. And in earlier days, well, let's say some time ago, we would still carry the hose line all the way up. We would pressurize the hose line on the door and take a let's say a chance that some of our hoses are not in a pristine condition anymore, and then we would have a very small fire and a very big damage in the corridor with the water that came in.
Yeah.
So so basically the idea is that we are doing the reconnaissance phase of our attack with these handheld extinguishers. In many cases, the handheld extinguisher is actually enough to put out the fire. If at the door you open the door and you see, okay, there's a big fire behind it, and you know that, okay, our foam extinguisher is useless, but you can still use your tri-chem and just put one tri-chem extinguisher from the door and close the door, and you will buy a lot of time for the second and the third guy to bring the hose line.
So it's sorry, go ahead.
Yes, because we have found out in our experiments that the tri-chem is a very very good extinguisher in a post flashover fire. It really very nicely absorbs heat. The heat absorption capability of the tri-chem is very good due to the chemical reaction that happens when there's enough heat. And so we can reduce the temperature of the fire compartment radically by using the tri-chem. And the second thing is that we can also prevent and make the probability of the smoke gases flashing. We can make that probability much lower with the tri-chem. So basically to reduce the heat and then do something. I'm not very comfortable in talking about inertization in this phase, but similar effect. So these are the two goals that we can achieve with using the tri-chem in a developed fire. and we'll have some time to then do a hose line, and then do an attack with the hose line.
So if I read you correctly, so one tool to firstly handle a lot of small fires and do that sometimes quicker than a hose line, but also with the potential of less damages because you're pressurizing a hose line that might break and so on. But also, especially looking at the dry powder, for buying yourself time to position the hose line in the correct position.
Exactly.
Would you when you teach or when you research, would you say that it's possible or likely maybe that the dry powder will extinguish a bigger fire, like a post flashover fire, or would you rather say it's just a way to maybe slow it down and buy some more time?
Well, it's really possible. It just depends on the fire load and the position of the fire load, and the phase of how developed the fire is. So we have done these experiments, and sometimes it basically extinguishes the fire. Obviously, if you have a smoldering, let's say, for example, furniture, you will always, after dry powder, you will have some smoldering afterwards. And then you will have to use something like a foam or water to get rid of the final smoldering fires. But especially in these sparsely populated areas where we have really small fire departments, and then there's a call for a house fire, it might happen that the first crew is with 1 or 2 people and not more.
Yeah.
And according to our current code, they are not allowed to do smoke diving with this amount of people, and so they have to think of something else. And this is one of the something else things that you could do in this situation. Put a dry chem from a window, from a mailbox, or opening the door a little bit, and then close after that, and you will have some more time for the, let's say, cavalry to arrive on the scene. So basically, you buy some time to get more people on the scene, and then you can start to do something more, let's say, radical approach.
So have you looked at other options then? You mentioned a foam extinguisher, you mentioned dry chem. First off, what's the standard size of a dry powder? When you talk about those research you've done, what's the standard size of that dry powder?
Well, we've tried several sizes, but I think 9 kilograms is more or less the standard that we have in the cars at the moment.
Would you say that's a good size, or is for?
Yeah, it's actually quite a good size for a normal, let's say, a flat sized normal flat, let's say 40 square meters to 60 square meters. I think you can do a lot of things with the 9 kilogram extinguisher there.
So have you also looked in different types of dry powder, or different compositions?
Not in detail. We have observed that there are quality differences. Obviously, there are dry powders that are more that are more effective than others, and we can also see that the extinguishing manufacturers use different qualities of powder when they want to reach certain classification for their extinguisher. So if you want to have a, let's say, 55A extinguisher, and you have a certain size of extinguisher that you can use, then you can choose a powder that meets the standard but doesn't cost so much. So that's the thing. If you want to have a better classification for the same size of extinguisher, of course you need to put a better quality powder in it, And the problem is that the person who buys the extinguisher from a shop really doesn't know this. Most of the people at the fire service think that dry powder is dry powder, period.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that it's like anything else in this world, that with a bit more money you get a bit better quality. So quality costs money.
So would you have you looked, like, when it comes to dry powder, have you noticed any difference? Is it in terms of the chemical composition, or is it depends on like grain sizes, or have you looked at any reasons why the dry powders have a difference?
No, we haven't, and I don't think that this is not exactly my expertise on the chemical matters of the dry powder. It would be interesting to study though. But maybe that would be a study for a university that teaches chemistry, or institute like that. We haven't studied the compositions or how they affect. We haven't studied that, but that's something I think we could add to the long list of things to study.
Yeah, there are a lot of old studies I can send to you if you're interested. Like there was a lot of studies in the Sweden, 20, 30 years ago on different compositions, but I don't know how they correlate to today's standards. I think they're pretty similar today. I think there's not been a lot of development in dry powder, but I might be wrong. No, so go on. So we talked about the dry powder, but the other one, have you looked at anything else than like the typical foam, typical Class A foam and dry powder? Have you looked at other extinguishing agents?
No, not really. We studied more like extinguishing methods, and so we tried. Well, we had these like backpack extinguishers with either water or foam. Yeah, I think they are. It's basically the same as a handheld extinguisher, but you can put it on your back. But we tried these different kinds of backpack extinguishers, and then we tried these high pressure. Well, did a lot of experiments with high pressure, like ultra high pressure or high pressure, and then obviously we tried CAFs.
On portable units, or would that be host-based units?
Host-based units.
Yeah.
So we did these
mountable on small cars in that case.
Yeah, and then we have these, and of course we also had the cold cut extinguisher, and all of these we had actually mounted in a fire truck. So basically, but obviously you can mount these into a smaller vehicle, of course.
So when you looked at those, what was your findings? What your results were?
Well, that's the thing that after a lot of experiments, the conclusion is that most of these tools are very good for a purpose, and there is not a single tool that would fit all the purposes. And this we knew before we started.
That's research. Sometimes
I don't know if this was a waste of time or a waste of money or both, but that's what we concluded, that of course you have a number of tools that have a number of purposes that they are built for, and all of them have certain advantages, certain disadvantages. Now, while we still have to wait for the one tool that fits all purposes, what we should at the fire service, what we should do is to study the tools and to study for which purpose they are good, and which purpose they don't suit, and then basically look at our risk profile. On my area, I would look, okay, I have these and these risks, and I could expect to have this and this kind of fires, and then based on that, I would decide which kind of tools I want to have in my box of tools to select. If I want to have a cold cut extinguisher, or because in your normal fire truck you don't have really space for everything, because you have to, well, at least in Finland we have all the traffic accident stuff in the same truck. So we cannot, if we have a water tank and a normal low pressure pump, and then we could have a high pressure pump, or we could have a cold cut, or something else, but not to fit everything. It doesn't really, it's very difficult to fit everything, and you don't really even need everything. So basically my idea is to look at the risk profile and to see what kind of fires you would expect, or what kind of fires you have had in the history, and then choose your tools accordingly.
So let's pick something. Let's pick a part-time fire station. We pick it in a rural area. They have mostly single-family houses, small shops, some industrial, like a typical rural situation. And they have a small fire truck, and you have portable fire extinguishers. But then you have to select a tool. Now, let's say your choices are between like a CAF system or an ultra high pressure water system. Let's say that's two big categories. What would make you select the CAF tool, and what would make you select the ultra high pressure water system?
Well, if we are on a rural area, the thing is that sometimes it can take like half an hour for you to reach the scene, or it can take even much longer time. And that usually means that the fire is either out or out of control, basically. That's your let's say in a standard family house, there's a fire, and you wait for 40 minutes. Either the people on site have already managed to put it out, or it's basically it's a fully developed fire.
Yeah.
And I think your basic normal low pressure would be quite suitable in this case, this kind of area. But if you want to have something with that, I probably wouldn't go with ultra high pressure, because in these cases where you go for you drive a long time and the fire has time to develop, it's quite probable that around 37 or whatever 40 liters per minute what you get from your ultra high pressure is probably not going to make much difference in the fire. So I think these kind of like for example the ultra high pressure would be suitable for a smaller, faster, let's say first unit on a larger fire station where you will have a big backup as a fire truck. So let's say you have a small van, and you can do a two guys will take the small van and get to the scene quickly. Then the ultra high pressure would probably be good tool, because it's rather quick then to deploy, and then probably your fire won't be that big at that point. But so then going back to your original question, if in the rural area I would have to select from between CAFs and the ultra high pressure, I would go with CAFs.
For the ability to put it on surfaces on adjacent houses.
For the ability to restrict the fire from spreading from house to house, because that's quite often the task that you get. That's your first assignment. Maybe if your driving distance is half an hour, then most probably the first house is more or less lost, and then the task is to protect the nearby houses. And I think the CAFs would be a good solution for that purpose.
Have you looked into the ability to use ultra high pressure as a water curtain to block radiant heat?
No, not really. No. we haven't looked at that, and this is another topic that actually I would add to my list of things to research if it wasn't there already. is the basic effectiveness of water curtains. There are some, well, I've seen some pictures where they take a picture from a water curtain, and when you look at the picture, it's mostly there's nothing, and there are a couple of drops in one picture, and so intuitively it feels like I'm not sure if it actually blocks that much radiation. So instead of putting that water to a water curtain, would it be more beneficial to just put the water on the target that you are trying to protect, like wetting the surfaces?
Yeah, wetting surfaces. Now there's some studies, and I know there's like the fire protection engineering program in Sweden. I know there was a guy or girl from Luleå who did a report on using water using the in that case the cutting extinguisher as a water curtain. Because there's some studies, like you said, when you look at pictures of large droplets, they just don't cover. There's too much space between the droplets to where radiant heat can pass. But if you have small enough droplets, they can block radiation. But you have to have really small droplets, so it's probably ultra high pressure. Now, so there's these hose lines where you can put up like 6-bar, 7-bar water jet up in front, and that is, I would say, in terms of how much water you use, it may be a limited amount of radiant heat you can block. Not saying that it's worse than nothing, but maybe not optimally. I attended a house fire, an acquired structure house fire in Norway just a couple of weeks ago. They used this big, like almost like you could picture it as a big giraffe. So like a big, probably 7, 8, 10 meters up in the air is the nozzle on a big pole, and then it creates a big water shield. But the bad thing about that, how acquired structure burned, because they put it up, and I was excited to see if there's going to make a difference, because they wanted to protect, they're going to burn this house down and protect the barn that was close by. But in the meantime, when they did that, they also had a hose line that wetted the surfaces behind the radiant shield. So they kind of destroyed my ability to look at did it actually block the radiant heat, because they were wetting the surfaces on the other side anyway. So I can't really tell you, but that was developed after that big, I don't know if you remember that big wooden house fire in Norway. It was a really windy day. I think it was it this summer or was it last summer? It might be last summer. But they burnt down, I don't know, 50, 200 houses. It was a war zone, basically. And that's where the problem arose, that what do we do with limited staffing if we have that kind of fire? We need some tools we can put up and kind of block the fire, and that was one of the products I think emerged from that. But like you said, I'm skeptical about its efficiency if it's not ultra high pressure. But if it's ultra high pressure, I think there's a potential, because there's some instances. As a fire service in Sweden had a nice fire not far ago. It's a nice picture. There's like a meter between a barn that burnt to the ground, and there's a meter between it, and there was another barn, and that barn even got its paint left, and they put two cobras between that wall, and they basically protected that house while the other barn burnt to the ground. So I think there is merit to that, but it has to be ultra high pressure, and I think it's wind sensitive, because when you get that small droplets, if you have a lot of wind and so on, it's hard to get droplets in the right place in the right amount to actually block radiation. But it might be interesting, especially if you do some research on it. I mean, I think there's not much to it. I think there's some from sprinkler studies. There are some, I think, that talk about radiant blocking radiation, but not a lot. But have you looked at other things like calves? Like there's this gel-based types of additives where you also can, put them on the surface, and you make sticky water, which is basically calves. Have you looked at other types of sticky water?
Not really. We have a couple of them that we will be now next summer. We will be looking at a couple of these additives in a project that we have regarding forest fires. So we have a couple of products that basically prevent the paralysis of vegetation. The other one is promised to do that even after having tried out after a couple of weeks. It still works. That's what they say. So we will be looking at those products, but in house fires we haven't really had anything else but calves in this sense. I've read about these products that I think somewhere in the United States they have used in protecting the houses from the bushfires or the forest fires, but we haven't had any experience here.
Yeah. Before now I'm going to jump back again, but just because I forgot to ask one thing. I think when we met at IF.W, you mentioned that you had some statistics saying that half of all fires are extinguished by portable fire extinguishers today.
Well, yeah, we have in Finland, each time the fire department goes out and comes back to the station, they will fill this report into a data system, and then it's been the system has been up and running since I think the 70s, and there was something even before that. So we have a very long statistics. Yeah, this is the statistics are as good as the person who's interpreting the statistics. So when we look at certain types of house fire calls, and we categorize them as house fires, or I don't know how to translate it, but a danger of a house fire, which means that it's a very small fire that didn't spread it into any structures except for the original point of fire, or the original thing that was on fire. That's we categorize as a danger of house fire. And then we have an actual house fire defined as some kind of fire that spread from the original seat of fire to something in surroundings.
Like a TV that spreads to a table, or a TV that spreads to a curtain or something.
Yeah, or a coffee maker on the stove, forgotten on the stove, and if it spreads to the cupboards above the stove, then that's categorized as house fire. Anyway, looking at these, and now that we've started our project, there is a tremendous increase in the amount of fires that have been extinguished with a portable handheld extinguisher. But the thing is that this it wasn't really, this wasn't asked in the form that you fill out before, and the questions came to the form after we started the project. So the historical timeline of this data is really short, but and we still are basically educating the people on how to fill the form, because we've noticed that in our statistics, it's actually, the statistics are, as I said, as good as the person who's interpreting them, but it's also as good as the person who is filling the form. And you can, if I learned anything at about 10 years of teaching at the university, I learned that there is no single question that you could ask from a group of people that they would all understand the same way. There's not a single question. I think. They will always interpret it a little bit differently. So so this is a challenge that we are also facing, that every time we add something to these statistics reports as questions, we have to then educate the people on what it actually means. So using handheld extinguishers in the house fire, and the amount of how many times it's been used, we just then realized that okay, we have to also separate whether it was a handheld extinguisher used by the person who lives in the building, or whether it was a handheld extinguisher used by the fire department. And then there's a difference also on that. So now we are having a new set of questions. Then we could, to separate that actually the fire department used a handheld extinguisher so and so often, and the inhabitants used the fire extinguisher so and so often. So a really long answer to a very simple question. But,
to a researcher, there are no simple questions.
Yeah. But well, I can say that we are seeing that the guys in the field are more and more using the handheld extinguisher. It's getting more and more popular because, well, they've also seen that there are certain advantages.
Do you think so? At least your gut feelings say it's on the rise. It's on the rise. Yeah. Do you see a need? Do you think the dry powder extinguisher is like it's good enough, or do you see there's a lot of potential for development in that area?
I think there's a room for development, and the biggest problem with dry chem is that if you use it in a place where let's say again, if you have a small fire that would make 500 euros worth of damage in a normal flat, with the dry chem you can create the damage of 10 or 20,000 euros in the same flat. So the problem with the dry chem is that it's really messy, and indoors the amount of work that is required to clean up afterwards is tremendous, and it's corrosive. So if you get it inside any kind of electrical equipment, televisions, computers, so forth, that kind of equipment will be basically destroyed. It will work for half a year, and then after the corrosion gets to it with the moisture in the air, it's basically done. So the thing is, well, what we try to tell people that if you have a fully developed fire, the dry chem is very good. But if it's just a small fire, don't use the dry chem, because, well, okay, if it's outside a car engine, that's a different. But if it's inside and you have a toaster or a coffee maker or whatever, try anything else but the dry chem, because you will destroy the apartment with the dry chem. We have seen, and we've tried a lot of these aerosol extinguishers where you have some kind of pyrotechnical system inside where there's basically like a burning effect that creates this rather hot aerosol that works the same way as dry chem, but it's in a smaller particle size, and that doesn't really give so much, that you don't have to clean up so much afterwards. So I think to go somewhere in that direction, to have a dry powder that would not be so messy, that would really be brilliant. I don't know how do you do it. The problem with these aerosol extinguishers is that in most cases the aerosol that comes out is like 300 400 degrees, so it's really hot. And with this aerosol extinguisher, it's the only extinguisher that I can think of that could actually start a fire if there wasn't a fire in the beginning. So, and I've seen it. One of our teachers, we had one of these aerosol extinguishers to try. So the guy pulls the pin and throws it into a trash can nearby, where there was obviously some trash in the trash can, with the result that we had a fire in the trash can after the extinguisher. So
yeah, I know there is I know that in Sweden there's several cases like that. I know there was fire departments using them, and there was a potential of, they thought it was a homicide, no, like a arson fire, because they found two separate fire zones. But it took a while before they realized that was the fire service throwing in the extinguisher grenade. So I think if you ask MSB, the authorities, I think they have a couple of reports of that happening at actual fires.
yeah.
So yeah, that is a problem.
Yeah.
And I know there's like a Norwegian guy who made like a videos out of those simpler, like those sticks you can buy for like private persons. And have you seen those? And they put out the same thing, but he also did like started fires with them, and that's not typically a good thing about when you try to sell them to the public.
Yeah, we had well, first of all, I think that's the problem with the aerosol extinguishers, is that you cannot use it when you have a small fire, because you will end up with two small fires.
Yeah.
So it's basically not useful for anything small. And we've tried these portable, the things that I don't want to say the name of the brand, but we've tried these portable aerosol extinguishers that you pull a plug and then you just aim and try to extinguish. And I haven't really found any good use for that extinguisher.
No, I've tried.
Unfortunately,
mostly suck.
Unfortunately, yes, because it doesn't. We tried we had a mannequin and some clothes on a mannequin, and we put these clothes on fire and tried this extinguisher, and it has a really strong blowing effect from the tip, so it actually made the fire worse. The only thing the extinguisher made the fire worse and growing. So I don't know what these extinguishers would be good for.
No, I know they also. I know there was also one of the fire protection engineers in, I think it was Luleå too, who made a report on using them for structure fires, like inside walls and stuff like that. But they didn't get any good results either. The thought was that would act like a gas, and it would travel within the void spaces and suppress the fire, but they didn't get good results either. And I think it's just simply that even though it's a very excellent suppressant, you either, like you said, you push things away and you get turbulence, and there's a lot of oxygen blowing into it also. Or, like in the sense with void spaces, it's a very hot gas, so it doesn't really cool like surfaces. Like smoldering combustion, it does nothing for, almost nothing.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the things. Is actually you're not taking any. Well, okay, there's a chemical reaction that basically is endothermic, but still the gas is really hot when it enters the space. So it doesn't really. It's actually, I don't really know whether the in the end the effect of the extinguisher is if you calculate everything in total, whether it's endothermic or exothermic really. what happens with the heat balance, and that would be something that probably somebody has already studied somewhere, but I haven't come across these kind of studies. But we tried aerosol extinguisher with we've done a very large set of tests with lithium-ion batteries. We tried also aerosol extinguisher when we were looking for an extinguishing solution for a client, and with the aerosol extinguisher we ended up in a small disaster. How should you say? An explosion of a small scale. So there's clearly there are places where the aerosol is not good for, and there are places where it is good. And whenever you have flammable gases or flammable liquids, then at least in these cases you have to be quite careful with the aerosol, because it can withhold the combustion for a while, and then you get an increasing amount of flammable gases, and then some of these gases have to go somewhere, otherwise the compartment pressure rises a lot. And whenever you have a gas that escapes from a compartment, you will for sure also lose some of the aerosol. And from the aerosol extinguishers, we know that it's a very rapid decrease in the extinguishing power when you go below certain threshold of concentration in the space. So if you get if you have a leak from the compartment and you are not adding the aerosol, at one point you will go below the threshold, and then you will have explosive atmosphere without practically any suppression power. So it can actually become disastrous even.
Sounds about right. Yeah. And that's the problem. And I think there's a lot of departments in Sweden that bought those kind of grenades because that was fashion. They did small tests on them. They didn't really understand them, and now they're everywhere. There's even one in my station. I go like, nah, I'm not going to use that one. And they're also very expensive compared to a dry powder, for instance.
Yeah, that's true. I think there are some cases where it would be justified to have it in your truck, and it would be justified to use in certain types of fires. But I think one of the challenges here is that for the basic firefighter who is doing his job and not doing research like myself or you, so it's really difficult for them to get so acquainted with the mechanism that they could see when is the time to use it and when not. And that's my concern, that it's a bit complicated tool for operative work where you have to make really quick decisions based on very limited and very uncertain information. And in this case, in this kind of situation, you should have tools that are very secure in almost any case.
Like the dry powder, which is
almost
the only drawback is that it's messy.
Yeah,
and that's
But if the space is on fire and you can see that it's basically all the contents is lost anyhow, so then I think the dry powder is really good, because you have nothing to lose anymore.
No.
Except you have something to win maybe.
Yeah. So what's the next? I know I understand you need to go soon, but what's the next thing happening in terms of firefighting in Finland? Where do you think the trend is blowing? Where do you think that a lot of the development and easy gains are to be made?
Well, I think what has become from our projects, now that we have made these projects and we have talked to the people in seminars and in conferences and wrote to the papers, we have a couple of papers that are like firefighter magazines in Finland, and we make these non-scientific articles like on plain firefighter language writing that what we have found out. And I think now this is getting to be fruitful in a way that people have now woken up to see that, okay, it's actually we have a lot of different tools. It's actually a box of tools, and we don't always have to pick the one that we have always used. So even though we have always used the hammer, it's not really always a nail that you have to work on. So actually the screwdriver that we have, that could be actually very useful if the object has this kind of typical hole that you can put the screwdriver easily in then and turn it. So that's what the progress is, that people are now looking at the things a bit differently, that we really have tools, and we just have to pick the correct one, and then we need to educate ourselves on how do we choose the correct tool for each case. So I think this is where the big transition on the field is now happening, and they are actively looking for alternatives. Like I think the gold cutter is gaining foothold now, and we are seeing these smaller, faster vehicles with like high pressure systems. So it's we are getting to a more versatile environment from what we used to have. It's a truck, it's a low pressure pump, it's hoses, and the fog fighter, as you mentioned already. From this, we are getting to a more versatile environment where we will have different types of trucks or vans for different types of areas, and then we will choose the extinguishing system according to our needs, and this is getting more popular now. I think that's where the major transition now is happening. But I think also with the reconnaissance with handheld extinguishers, that has seen a breakthrough, because now we are getting these messages or emails from the field, from the guys who said that write a report and send pictures and say, okay, now we've used this and this and that in this kind of fire and it worked very well. Or then they will write the same and they said, okay, it didn't work at all. But what from this we can see that they are now ready to try new things and to learn new things.
Do you think that the fire service in Finland, is it national, or is it there different regions, right?
Yeah, we have actually 20, I think at the moment, and I have to say I think because there has been some changes, but I think we have 22 fire departments at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's like regional.
Yeah. So do you think if we're in the process of going from one hammer to a bunch of tools, which increases the complexity to choose the right tool, do you think there is also a push for more or at least different education for firefighters, both in terms of the foundation education, but also in terms of everyday practice?
Yeah, this is of course it's a slow process, and I know that in this field, well, I think on any which field in human life, let's say in field of work, there are people who have been doing something the same way for 25 years, and they are quite convinced that they will do the same the next 25 years. And then there are people who are more, let's say, eager or willing to change. And I think it's the young generation that is basically now looking, they are hungry for answers and education. And I'm happy to see that they are actually now dragging the old farts with them. So we are progressing. The young guys are actually, they tell the more, let's say, more experienced guys that look, there's this new method that we could try, and then that's the way it changes. But we have these courses that we run on these new fire extinguishing methods, and there are a lot of people coming to these courses, and we have to make selection. We cannot take everybody, and we'll just make basically our selection is based on geographical things that we want to spread the word evenly in the whole country. But there are more people coming for these courses than we have room for.
Oh,
So
that's
I
fantastic.
think, yeah, so I think there are people are quite, the people want to learn. That's for sure. And actually, what they also want to do, they want to try for themselves, and that's the main idea of our courses, that we don't sit in the classroom and teach. We go to the field and we'll try everything, and they will try. The students can try for and see for themselves, and that's the way the things develop.
But I never been to Kuopio.
Ah, well, you should come and see.
Yeah, I've only seen it on pictures and videos.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, I think we'll have a chance one day.
Yeah, I hope so. Maybe you can arrange IFIW.
Why not?
And invite me to Kuopio. No, but no, I want to come, and I would love to see one of those courses in basically the toolbox for firefighting. That would be awesome to see one of those courses someday.
Well, we'll see what we can do about it. The thing is that teaching is in Finnish, so you have to brush up your Finnish.
1, 2, 3. Ei saa peittää.
Okay.
I am not gonna do all the ugly words, which I learned.
Oh, then we have to make a Swedish course, because we should have it anyway.
Yeah, no, you have. I mean, at least there's some parts of Finland that actively speaks Swedish. So if you do a Swedish course, yeah, I would love if you tell me. I would love to come there and visit. And there's probably other people here from Sweden that want to come with me, and we'll probably be more bystanders than you have classmates.
Okay.
I don't know, but that would be interesting. No, I think I need to go too. But great talking to you, Marko.
Likewise, thank you.